you. I'd like to tell you, I'm coming from Colorado Springs, and the patriotism and the love of our military and armed forces, you can really feel it here, and I appreciate that so much. When I saw the 17 December date up there, I got a little emotional because that place there in Arlington is very special to me, both professionally and personally. About a week ago was the 3-year anniversary of when we buried my brother-in-law there. He was shot and killed in Iraq, and he was in the United States Army, and I did hear the hoo for the Army there. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my background, because I was told that some are considering service, and I want to tell you, after the 30 years that I have served, I would not change a thing. I absolutely love serving, and I'm going to walk you through that a little bit. And then I want to give you an understanding of why space, I believe, is important where I work at as a Marine serving at Space Command. My teammate, Master Sergeant GP, Tech Sergeant GP, soon to be Master Sergeant GP, Gonzalez Parrish, is in the Space Force. And so if you want to talk to someone about the newest service in the Armed Forces, we got him here as well. So without further ado, we'll try this out. All right, very cool slides. I had nothing to do with building those. I've got a team that does that. So I came in the Marine Corps, like was told, 20 January 1993. And at that time, I was a 17-year-old kid. All I knew is I wanted to do something hard, and I needed to get away from my family as quick as possible. And if you knew my family, you would probably have done the same thing, if not faster. Right? A little bit crazy. I've got the crazy aunts and uncles and mom and dad, and I just knew I needed to get away for a variety of reasons. Born in New Hampshire, grew up in California, and I needed to join the Corps. And so I came in, and I wanted to go in infantry. Any infantrymen? I know we got one Jeremy infantryman here. That's what I wanted to do. But I'll tell you, I took the same test as you, and they tricked me. They said, hey, you were sober that day. We want you to go to Intel instead. And so I worked in the intelligence field for the majority of my career, and it's been a great opportunity. And as luck should have it, when I finished Intel school in Virginia Beach, I was assigned to Marine Corps Air Station New River to a unit that wasn't going to go anywhere. This was in 1993. They weren't going to go anywhere. I was bummed out. I was disappointed. But an individual broke his ankle, and they said, next Marine up, you're heading out to, I went to a helicopter squadron, and we went on what we call a Marine Expeditionary Unit on the USS Guam. So I'm about 18 years old at the time, and a few months prior, you may recall, we had the incident with Black Hawk Down. And the President of the United States had called the Marines in to help secure the port, and the Army was going to move out. And so I found myself in Afgoye Road, right there in Mogadishu, Somalia, at 18 years old, and it was real. It suddenly got real as you heard the crack of bullets flying over your head, and you realize, okay, this is not training anymore. This is not high school anymore. This is the real deal. This is the real deal. And so at 18, I found myself in Somalia. We finished up that deployment. There were some really beautiful times in that deployment, too. 6th of June, 1994, which was the 50th anniversary of D-Day. We got to reenact and help reenact that ceremony. I met the Queen and the President of the United States and several other dignitaries, and we did the 50th anniversary of that event. Came home from that deployment, just like many others, had an opportunity to go out and deploy one more time with the Air Force and support them. And then I came back to do one more deployment on the USS Nassau out of North Carolina. And another routine deployment. We were going through everything until Tirana, Albania decided we're going to have a civil war. And it's not a well-known bit of history, but the Marine Corps went in there for about 2 months. The first 3 days, heavy gunfire, we went in. You see I've got aircrew wings. I went in on a CH-46, and we went in to basically go to all of the American citizens out of the embassy, and then what we call TCNs, third country nationals. And we went in to help get them out. And it was one of the proudest days of my life, still is. I remember as we were evacuating this Italian family from the embassy in Tirana, this young mother who was trying to carry all of her luggage onto the aircraft, and her family, and there's gunfire going off and whatnot, and we get her onto the helicopter finally. We get out of there. We're wrestling with the seatbelt to help her out, And I don't know if she spoke English very well, but I could see in her eyes, she just looked at us, and the thanks. Wow, very powerful. And that ultimately captures to me the essence of why I serve, and I would venture to say many of you have served. It is about helping others. It's not necessarily deploying and doing things you see on the video games and just shoot people in the face. Far more important things to do, and that's saving people. So got to do that, and then I was able to go out for about 4 years and go into Hawaii. So if you're thinking of joining the armed forces, there's a beautiful opportunities in Hawaii. And Chaplain, I saw your badge there, 25th ID, right? Right. So you allowed this Marine to go to your air assault school, and I appreciate that. I got to go to air assault school with the United States Army's 25th ID out there, do some great things in Hawaii. Loved it. It's beautiful. If nothing more, that's a good reason to join the armed forces. Did that for about 4 years. And then I found myself at 7th Marine, at 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, deployed to Okinawa. And before I deployed to Okinawa, the world changed. 9/11 happened. I was a staff sergeant in the Marine Corps. I was going to my professional military education course, and 9/11 happened. And we knew, game on. Game on. Not sure where we were going. We just knew, let's get our rifles, let's get ready. We are going somewhere. And the world changed that day. We happened to go to Okinawa for about 6 months, and then we came back. 2003, I was with the 7th Marine Regiment, and we pushed right into Iraq. I was part of the initial invasion with many others. Some of you may have been there. And we got into Baghdad and got to do that. Were you there, sir? Who are you with? Okay. You're just that guy now. Awesome. Well, thank you. So got to do that deployment there, and it was interesting. I remember towards the end of it, my Colonel Jim Howcroft, love the man. He said, "Hey, at the time I was a Gunny. Hey, Gunny, we're going to finish this deployment up. The war is over now. Why don't you go out and start handing out the maps to the Polish? The multinational force is going to take over. We're going to head home." So, wow, good deal. Okay, this is around September. We get home around October. Get back to take a little leave. Get back in January, right back out there. And so we found ourselves in Iraq again. You've read about, and some of you may have served as well. We had Fallujah 1 and Fallujah 2, so a lot going on there. And I found myself midway through that deployment getting orders from the Marine Corps saying, "Hey, you got to go back to Hawaii." Really? Okay. Who's gonna deny when you're in Iraq and going through that hell to take an opportunity to go back to Hawaii? So I did, and that was an awesome opportunity for me because, and Doc and I were talking about this. This is an opportunity for me to go do a thing called the Joint Task Force Full Accounting, where we go and look for our missing in action and our POWs. And so I found myself operating in Vietnam, flying on Mi-17 Russian helicopters in Laos and in Cambodia, in Thailand, talking to folks. Do you know where there's a helmet at? We're surveying sites so we can bring some of our folks home. And I was really proud that we were able to do that. Unfortunately, we didn't find anyone alive, but we were able to bring closure to many of the families to let them know where their friends were. Interestingly enough, I got another phone call about 2 years into that assignment. They said, "Hey, we need you back in Iraq." And I found myself with 2nd Marine Division in Tikrit for about 14 months. And that was my final combat tour there. And then I've done some subsequent more headquarters tours, which are quite boring to you all. But they were pretty fascinating. So the National Security Agency got to work there, the Defense Intelligence Agency, Cyber Command, and now Space Command. And I'll tell you, when I was asked to interview for Space Command, I don't know if this will resonate with some of you, but I thought I was the throwaway COA, which means you have option A, option B, and then, this one is the joke. We're not actually going to consider this. So I put on my uniform. I interviewed with General Raymond, who at the time was both the Chief of Space Operations and the Commander of Space Command. I interviewed with him via VTC, and I thought to myself, no way in hell I'm going to get this job. And he said, "Hey, I'm just looking for a warfighter and a leader." Okay, well, I got that, sir. And a few days later, he called me back and said, "You're coming out." And so now I've been out at Space Command for about 2 years, a little over 2 years, got about a year left to go, and absolutely love it. Great opportunity to be there. And I want to talk to you today about why I think it's important that it exists. Okay? So, they gave me this. Let me see if I am trainable. Okay. So, if you cannot see this, there's a few slides here in the front and the back. Let me tell you what you're looking at. This slide basically depicts Cold War, Desert Storm time frame, and then China and Russia really not focusing on space-based capabilities. But what they did do is they observed us in Desert Storm, and some of you may have served there. I did not. I wasn't in yet. But they observed how well we were able to use space-based capabilities. Things like precision-guided munitions, or warheads on foreheads, if you will. The ability to drop bombs, smart bombs, right where we want them, required a GPS signal, a space-based capability to do that. And so they observed how well we did this, and then you can see them ramp up their capabilities. So much so that in 2007, China decided we are going to show the United States that we can launch a missile into space and blow up our own satellite. And they did that. And today we track still all of that orbital debris. On the 15th of November last year, the Russians did the same thing. Conveniently, they did that because they know how heavily the United States relies on space. And so they decided, we're going to remind you that we can shoot down one of your satellites. And oh, by the way, a few months later, they invaded Ukraine. So, can I say 2 and 2 is 4? Yes, I can. Obviously, they did that to send a message to us that if you're going to do that, we can take out your capability. And so you can see the increasing trend of this. Another number I'll throw at you is 25,000. So 2 years ago, when I joined Space Command, we were tracking what we call space domain awareness. We were tracking about 25,000 objects in space, whether they are satellites, pieces of debris, you name it. That number is now up to 40,000. Now, why does that matter? Why does that matter? Because I would imagine many of you here want to watch the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday. No? Okay, I think so. I can say I'm in Kansas. Okay, so I think that's important to you. Your cellular phones are important to you. Us being able to live stream Paul into here, all of the capabilities that we use today, even the airplane I'm going to get on tomorrow, the ATM machines, all of them rely on space-based capabilities. And so, as we have more and more pieces of debris in space, the concern is something called the Kepler effect. Anyone familiar with the Kepler effect? What's that? I didn't see the movie, but I can explain Kepler, sir. All right. So, the Kepler effect is something like this. If an object hits another object in space, it creates kind of a spiderweb effect, takes out another object, and you can see where this can go quickly. It can get to the point where potentially we would be back in the 1940s, where nothing wrong with the 1940s, but we didn't have the internet, we didn't have cellular phones, we didn't have satellite TV, you name it. Okay? And, oh, by the way, it would cause dramatic harm to our economy, more importantly, the global economy. So we're very, very concerned about things like the Kepler effect and adversaries blowing things up in space, so much so that the United States and this administration recently decided we will not do that, and we're asking other nations in the United Nations to sign on to that agreement as well. So that's why I believe this is important. But let me bring it home to you a little bit, and this is another sexy slide someone built for me. You may recall a few years ago, Xi Jinping, the president, who, if he hasn't been yet, he's getting ready to take his third term here, and he'll be the president for life. He said, hey, there's some islands out there in the first island chain that naturally belong to China. We're going to rebuild them. Basically what he did is he built a lot of man-made islands across his coast. But don't worry about this, international community. We're not going to weaponize those islands. We're not going to do that. Trust me. No problem. Okay. Roger. And then he went on to weaponize those islands. Not only increasing his bombing capability range, but China also has, at a 10-to-1 ratio, the ability to jam our satellite capabilities, whether that is satellite communications, global positioning system, you name it. And so, if China were to, and let me underline in bold if, because they haven't, were to go and try to take back by force what they believe is theirs, That's an away game for us. That's what we call an away game. We've got to get in there. And the challenge for us is that the United States Armed Forces heavily relies on space and cyber. China knows this. We talked about that in the last slide. And so getting into there will be a challenge predominantly, not just kinetically, meaning missiles and bombs and that sort of thing, but in the electromagnetic spectrum where they can jam us. And so I can't communicate with my partners and allies, with my soldiers, sailors, and Marines and Guardians. I can't use GPS to potentially navigate, or it makes it a lot harder. And so that's why this domain of space is so incredibly important. And I believe that's why on the 29th of August 2019, we stood back up Space Command. Okay, there's other weapon systems that I want you to be aware of. Again, a really sexy slide. You may have heard of these things called hypersonic weapons. Hypersonics. What is that? Well, these are weapon systems that not just exceed Mach 5, so going at extreme speeds, but they can maneuver as well. So our number one priority in this thing called the National Defense Strategy is homeland defense. Well, if you have weapon systems that can exceed Mach 5 and can maneuver, it becomes very, very hard not only to track them, but to do much about it. Now, we're also developing capabilities such as this, but speed and the ability to maneuver is a challenge. And so, again, this is something that Space Command tracks. We report to our other combatant commands and senior leaders so that, God forbid, something like this is used, we have a defense against this and we can deter that type of aggression. All right. I won't go too much into this one. What I'm trying to tell the narrative here is, from here up are the warfighting requirements of Space Command. Meaning, we are here to deter aggression. We want to make sure all nations can utilize space freely and openly. All nations, all industry, commercial sectors to do that, to explore space. Elon Musk says, we're going back to Mars. Roger that. Then go to Mars. And we want everyone to be able to do that freely and fairly, just like the open seas. Underneath this are the services, the Marine Corps, the Army, so on and so forth. But specifically, I call out the Space Force here because there's confusion. There's a lot of confusion between Space Command and Space Force. They do the mission of organizing the units, training the individuals, equipping them with capability, and then presenting them to Space Command, or you may have heard of Special Operations Command, Cyber Command, CENTCOM, those combatant commands, because my boss, who is an Army 4-star general, has the war-fighting authorities. And so my boss, General Jim Dickinson, is the commander of Space Command. His chain of command is the Secretary of Defense and the President of the United States. That's it. That's who he reports to, so that he can execute those missions as necessary. Those things are very similar to other domains. They could be maneuver. We may have to move satellites out of the way. All right? Let me walk you through a scenario. 15 November last year, as the Russians shot down one of their satellites, we were in there in the watch floor. I think it was like 3 in the morning. We're watching this. My boss is on the phone with senior leadership in the department, and we also had NASA on the hook. Why is that? Because that debris potentially could have hit the International Space Station. And we had to tell them, if we saw something, get in your pod and evacuate. Luckily, we did not have to do that. And oh, by the way, there were Russians in the International Space Station as well, because we have great partnerships with a lot of nations at NASA in the space industry. But we may have had to do that. And so, again, those authorities are unique to the command. And just like the United States Army organizes, trains, and equips, and then presents their forces to a different combatant commander, so doesn't the Space Force. And I'll be happy to talk about that if you want. Our mission, our mission's very easy. We want to deter aggression. We want a free and open space domain. We want everyone to be able to operate in space. If DirecTV wants to put more satellites up there, great, enjoy. But you need now a defense capability there, so that adversaries don't just decide, well, we're going to plant a flag on the moon, and that is now our region. Now, I don't know how many of you know this or not, but China right now is on a certain side of the moon that we're not observing. We're not watching what they are doing up there as well. And why would they be doing that? Any ideas? Any thoughts? Well, I don't know how many of you have the new iPhone 14 or pick your device, but there are rare precious metals in space, on asteroids, on planets. And so if you can mine those and bring those back, a lot of economists say there's basically trillions of dollars worth, $1 trillion economy out there. It's just a matter of bringing it all back. Or if you can find water, now you could potentially sustain life up there as well. And so we want to deter the aggression. We want to make sure that whoever wants to go to space can go to space. But there has to be some kind of rules of the road there. Right now there's a little bit, not quite. There are some rules out there, but it's kind of quasi like a wild, wild west. Okay. I'm not sure that this slide is relevant to all of you, but what I wanted to show you here is all of the services have what we call a component that provides service members to Space Command. And so you have the United States Army's Space and Missile Defense Command. They're out of Huntsville, Alabama, and they have a det there in Colorado Springs with us as well. You have the Marine Corps, who about 4 months ago decided they're going to have individuals that are trained to understand space-based capabilities. And so you have Marine Corps Forces Space Command at Fort Meade in Maryland. You also have the Navy and Navy Space, who is in Fort Meade as well. Many of those operators in the Marine Corps and the Navy are dual-trained cyber and space individuals, and so they understand both of those domains. And then you have the United States Air Force, who provide a really unique capability to us, and that is to make sure that when our astronauts come home, they are there to rescue them. Okay? And so they have what they call their Special Forces operators, or PJs, that will go into the ocean, rescue them, and I got to meet them recently and how they train. Incredible individuals. They go in, fly anywhere in the world, pick up the individuals, and bring them home. And then, of course, you have the Space Force, who provide, I would say, about 75% of our operational capability. And so that's what I would pick up from this slide. Quite frankly, if you're not tracking what a headquarters look like, listen, we have the same as any other headquarters. We have a headquarters, we've got admin, we've got intel, we've got operations, logistics, you name it. This slide, I think, is incredibly important to all of us, though, because more and more, if you recall in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, when we would put something in space, when there would be a launch, we would shut down schools. We would pause as a nation and watch it. Hey, are you watching the launch tomorrow? Of course I'm watching the launch tomorrow. I'll give birth the next day. I'm going to watch the launch. This is a big deal. All right? My wife just gave birth 2 weeks ago, so I can say this. Thank you. Thanks, sir. Thank you. This is a big deal. Nowadays, there's a launch 2 to 3 times a week. And when our commercial partners, like SpaceX and others, put something in space, they launch 50-plus satellites at a time. It's remarkable. So much so that about 6 months ago, Vladimir Putin, or someone, said to Elon Musk, hey, if you help Ukraine, I'm going to shoot down one of your satellites. And Elon said, hey, no problem. I'll put 50 more back up. This is how far the commercial sector has outpaced the Department of Defense and, quite frankly, our adversaries. Because Russia doesn't have in their kit bag 50 direct-to-send ASAT missiles that they can go shoot up out of the sky. And even if they did, they could put 50 more back up there. And so industry is the lead now in technology and innovation and how we're going to do a lot of things. It's so incredible to see, and you can pull this up on YouTube. You'll see SpaceX now launch something into space, and the primary booster will literally come back and land right on a dime. It's remarkable. It's unbelievable. He was told he couldn't do it. And now he's saying he's going to do the secondary booster, and everyone's telling him he can't do it. Yeah. Watch. He will. It's remarkable what they're doing in industry. And you're going to hear in probably the next year or so that we are going to have in space refueling capability. All right? Now, I don't know what a gallon of gas goes for in space. It's getting better out here. It's $3.15. Not bad. I want to see it keep coming down a little bit more. But we're going to have a refueling capability in space because of industry. And I've talked to those CEOs. They've said, we're going to do this. We're going to have literally corporations that can go, I'll write you a check, sir, to your company. I need you to go up there and collect some space junk. And so we're going to have the garbage man up there. We're going to have a refueling station. It's remarkable where we're going to go here. And I am convinced Artemis will launch soon. Artemis will launch and circle around the moon. And then shortly thereafter, we will have a man and a woman back on the moon. And then shortly thereafter that, at some point in our lifetimes, we're going to see humans on Mars. It's remarkable what we're doing. And quite frankly, it is primarily, not all, but it's primarily because that we are unleashing the commercial sector and letting them get after it. We have a lot of allies and partners too. That tends to be our strategic advantage against a China and a Russia who have little to none. We have a ton of allies and partners. I have a British brigadier general that works in the same building with me. Tremendous individual. We've got you name it. You can see all the flags up there. We've got them up there as well. And then off to my right, your left, you can see some of the policy documents that came out. I haven't updated that. Recently, the National Security Strategy has come out. You can read that online if you'd like. But it talks about the importance of space for us as a nation. All right. Our 4 Ds that are up there. Now, how many of you that did serve were non-commissioned officers? Okay. Good amount of you. How many officers we got in here? Okay. So the officers know this. The NCOs have lived this. There's a D missing on there. Any guesses? Shout it out. I'll help you out here. Develop. As a non-commissioned officer, you got to develop your people. And so if we are going to deter, defeat, deliver, and defend our great nation, it is incumbent upon individuals like myself and the NCOs that raise their hand in there to develop our people. And so I spend an awful lot of time, I'd say probably a vast majority of my time, on what I call the 50, developing our people so that we can do our mission set there. All right. I talked to you about the threat. I walked you through why it's important that Space Command exists. I want to talk you through two things real quick here, and then a little bit of humorous slides in the end, and then open up for questions. But there are two things, I would say, that allow us to defeat what China, what Russia, and other adversaries are trying to do in space. And those are what I call the 2 T's. Talent and technology. This being talent. All right? Now, any of you served in World War II? In World War II veterans. I got to meet last Saturday a guy named Jack Slocum. And you want to talk heroes. This guy, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Incredible individuals. I got to spend a few hours with him on Saturday night. I remind the folks that work in my building all the time, we have fought and won as a nation before without space-based capabilities because we had trained and ready and lethal warriors. Same thing here. These are individuals who could be using a GPS, a satellite communication phone, you name it, but they're old school training, map and compass. Where's my shipmates at? Where are my sailors at? All right, sir. Sextant. Thank you, sir. I don't get. Yeah. Do you remember how to use it, sir? Oh. Yeah. And we're still using it today. Right. Here's the other thing too. We've got to be able to use because we emit a lot of emissions out of the ships, which allows them to be tracked. Things called MCON, emissions control. So I told the sailors, when you go out to sea, you got to shut your stuff off and train to be able to do that, just like we did in prior wars. Okay, and so talent is critical to how we're going to win these fights. It's nice to have exquisite Gucci capabilities, cyberspace, you name it. But we got an adversary that wants to shut that down. I've got to have people that can fight and win without it. And so developing our people to use a sextant, to use a map and a compass. You know, and I will tell you, some folks that haven't had to use it in a while, that skill set goes away. You got to keep it repetitive. All right. And then this one here. Now, this one I don't expect anyone to know much about, but if you understand kind of how jamming is done via the electromagnetic spectrum, it's just think of one person strong and this person is stronger. My signal is stronger than that signal. I can overpower it and jam it. That is what most of the jamming capability is today. All right, there's some few nuances there, encryption and that sort of thing. But ultimately, one is stronger than the other. What the Space Force, using the Marine Corps and the Navy have come up with is a thing called the Next Generation GPS, or M-code. Not going to be a test on this. Don't expect you to memorize it. But the bottom line is this capability, which is in space today, will allow us to get after that problem set I talked to you about, and I showed you the map of China, so that we can get in there and utilize this and not be jammed. And so the two T's being, again, talent and technology, which will allow us to fight and win in there and still do our job. All right. Now we'll talk a little bit of leadership real quick. And I put this up here. I was told there'd be a certain crowd up here that needed some leadership talks. Okay. When I served at Marine Corps Forces Special Operations from 2010 to 2014, it was one of the easier jobs I ever had. It was one of the most rewarding jobs I ever had. I was in charge of 383 Marines. Every one of them, multiple combat tours, the best of the best. It was not too hard to lead these individuals. You get to hand select your team. Not hard, right, sir? Not too hard. However, no matter what we did, we still attrited out a certain percentage of those individuals. It wasn't because they couldn't shoot, move, or communicate. It wasn't because they couldn't swim well, run fast, pick up heavy things. It wasn't any of that. It was normally a character flaw. And so as I was talking to the commanding general about the character of the individuals and how we evaluated, he asked me, how would you do it? Okay? Now, I don't think this is an original idea I came up with, but I said, this is what I would do, sir. When it is cold and wet, when it's windy out, it's night, and it doesn't matter, I want you to see what individuals does something as basic and simple as returning the shopping cart to where it belongs. Because if that individual has the character to do what is right when no one is looking, I can make them faster, I can make them smarter, but I want them on my team. It is all about character. Doing what is right, integrity, when no one is looking, doing the right thing. And that shopping cart became kind of an example. Now, obviously, we didn't line Marines up and say, put the shopping cart back. It was a good idea. I didn't say I had to implement it. But character. And so if you are ever considering an opportunity to serve, just know this. All of the schools you go to, whether they're technical, physical, lack of sleep, you name it, at the end of the day, as long as you don't quit and you have character, you'll get through all of them. It's always about character. Now, what is he talking about here? I don't want you to boo me out of the room yet. Please don't do that. I'm not going to tell you how great the Cleveland Browns are. You're smarter than that. But what I do want to talk to you about is leadership. And I use this team as an example because, now, any Cleveland Brown fans in here? I've never met one in my life. They may not. I've been to Cleveland. I've been to a game there. They've got an interesting history. But let's be honest, the last few years and decades have been a history of losing. And so this is a losing team who fairly recently in their history had two of the greatest of all time. Any ideas who those two would be? Any ideas at all? Where's my football fans? Any? All right. Now, don't boo me out of the room again. But Nick Saban and Bill Belichick. Two of the greater coaches of all time, right? We don't have to like them. All right. I am from New Hampshire, so maybe I like Belichick. I won't say here. And Nick Saban, who has been a tremendously successful football coach in college, and Bill Belichick has been a tremendously successful coach there. But they didn't fit in. They didn't look. They didn't have the look and the lean and fit look that Cleveland was looking for. And so they let them go. They let the individuals go, and they went on to have great success elsewhere. And so whether you're running a business, you're thinking of joining the armed forces, or you're just running Post 370, what I would offer to you is leadership is about taking the team you have, finding the Belichick and the Saban, developing those individuals, unleashing their skill sets, and then you'll have a history and a culture of winning. Okay, and that is what Cleveland has not done well. All right, I'm not a paid advertiser for them, but I would offer, if they would have done that, they'd probably see greater success than they have today. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I think I've talked a couple more minutes than I was supposed to. I apologize, Sri. I would prefer to now just have a Q&A with you and answer whatever may be on your mind. Any questions at all? Okay. We're running the mic around now. Okay.
What are your thoughts on North Korea launching these nuclear warheads or nuclear-capable missiles over our ally, Japan?
What are my thoughts on North Korea? So I just want to clarify a point. The missiles, unless there's intel that I don't know about, have not had nuclear weapons on them. However, I think what your point is if they decided to put that warhead on there, right? It's tremendously scary. It's provocative. It's dangerous. I don't think nations that want to be in the international community are launching missiles over one another. And so that is why the sanctions have been hitting them hard. But let's be frank. I don't think Kim Jong-un really cares about his people, right? And if you've seen how they've been able to survive the regime, what have they used is cyberspace. They've used cyberspace to go in and steal a lot of crypto, so they still have money coming in to fund some of these programs. I would offer to you, if you get an opportunity to read a book, pick up the book Dear Leader. It is an incredible book. It talks about the horrific conditions there. But yeah, I think it's horrible that they're doing that. It's something that we keep an eye on. Right next to Space Command is Northcom. So every time that happens, they're running around trying to figure out what's going on to make sure it's not inbound to the United States, right? Because as that technology gets better and better, they can surpass Hawaii, and then the West Coast needs to start looking out. So it's scary. Absolutely. Thank you, sir. Ross, sir. Thank you.
Have you ever been to space?
Only in my dreams. So, the question is, have I ever been to space? No, I have not. I have not. But, that's a great question, and I'll tell you why. It is something that I would love to do sometime. But I promise you this, the way things are going today, whether you choose to be an astronaut or you decide to work with one of these companies or serve in the Marine Corps, those opportunities will be there for you. All right. Right now, it's a little bit out of my hand. I don't have a couple $1 billion to be a space tourist. Right. So unless you're elite and wealthy, you could do that today. I could not. But that opportunity is going to be there for you. We do have a flag right next to my office that flew in space, and I've met some of our remarkable astronauts. So it's pretty cool. Matter of fact, what's interesting is the last mission that went to the International Space Station was commanded by a Marine colonel, the first female Native American to go into space. So it was a pretty cool colonel man. But I have not been yet. So thank you. And well done on the national anthem, by the way. Or, excuse me, on the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Are you in the Scouts? Okay, I heard you say 2 at the end. I picked that up. Awesome. Thank you. I was in the Scouts.
Thank you for your words tonight.
Yes,
you have the best and brightest of Shawnee Mission School District Engineering and Cybersecurity here. What words of advice would you give them on their path from high school to potentially contributing to the Space Command mission?
Awesome. Thank you guys for coming here, by the way. Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. I have a few things. One, I think what separates us in cyber from China and other nations is, quite frankly, we don't just do things linearly, step 1, step 2, step 3. And I've heard this acronym start to catch on, and I believe in it sincerely, STEAM. So adding that art piece to it. Creativity. Thinking a little bit outside the box. Not just because I say it's step 1, step 2, step 3, maybe not. Right, and then when I went through a course at Cyber Command, they had us read the book Ender's Game. You can watch the movie; it's very much the same, but it's doing that really realistic training. So for me, I think it's focusing on the art. Mathematics is huge, obviously, and then ask tough questions, ask challenging questions. But I think the best of us, the individuals that I have found to be the best, aren't necessarily the ones that have all of the nice diplomas on the wall and all of the accolades. It's the individuals who take it on as a true passion. just like anything. Whether you're a golfer and you hit 100 extra balls after practice, or you're a power lifter and you eat that extra piece of beef, whatever is your thing, I think if it's a passion, let it go and continue on with it. And then I would offer to all of you, so my last job was at the National Security Agency. There are a lot of internship opportunities there. Incredible opportunities. Not saying you need to work there forever, but incredible opportunities to work with the most brilliant mathematicians, coders, cybersecurity professionals that are out there. So please keep it up. There will be so many opportunities for you. Follow your passion. Follow your heart. The sky is literally, it's not even the limit anymore. It's beyond the sky in cybersecurity. So I think it is focusing on the art piece of it. Obviously, the basics of mathematics and computer science matter. And then following your heart and just doing it every single day, right? Challenging yourself, entering cyber competitions where there are some to improve. Yes, ma'am. Hopefully that answered your question. Thank you. Thank you guys for being here. Hi, Miss Kansas.
Hi. Can you tell me more about Artemis 1?
I can. And then if you'd like, we can talk about Artemis 2, 3, and 4. But Artemis 1 right now, because of the hurricane, I think, and GP, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think they had to take it off of the, they put it back in? Okay, yeah. So Artemis 1 is the largest rocket ever created by humans. Ever. It is massive. I got to see it recently out there in Cape Canaveral in Florida. And ultimately what Artemis 1 is a way to prove that we can go back to the moon, land humans on there, return them safely, and sustain that. And so Artemis 1 is going to be a test. It was supposed to happen months ago. It got delayed for a variety of reasons, the most recent being the hurricane. And I couldn't tell you when the next scheduled opportunity is, but they're going to continue to try to push this. I think there's 1 or 2 more opportunities this year. And then Artemis 2, I think 2 years after that, we'll have both the first woman to land on the moon and whoever else on there. And they're going to go to the moon, land on the moon, do some testing there, come back, and then we're going to do Artemis 3. We're going to move out to Mars. Artemis 4 and 5, we're going to start putting people on Mars. And so this is an entire decades-long program to explore, to understand science, opportunities, and how humans can live in an extended environment. Hopefully that answers your question, ma'am. Thank you. Great job up here, by the way. Thank you. Other questions, thoughts, concerns, anything on our mind?
May I please ask one more?
Yes, you may, sir.
If we're going to put human beings on Mars, what are we doing to mitigate the radiation that kills people?
Yeah, so there was an article a couple weeks about that. What are we doing about it? We're working behind the scenes to figure out how we're going to live there, right? Because it's not something we can sustain right now, and I don't believe there's anything that I am aware of that would allow us to put humans on there and to live realistically, right? We're not going to have, a 2-ton suit that we got to put on a human to do that. At least I don't think we are. And so that is why this is all scientific exploration. We're going to get up to Mars, we're going to get to the moon and figure some of it out. And then Artemis 3 or 4, I can't remember, is going to go to Mars, take some samples. We actually have a robot drone on Mars today. It's incredible. I don't think it can fly anymore, but it's remarkable where we're at. And we're going to bring some of that back so that we can test it, so that we can do this. Because I think the one thing I really respect and admire about NASA and all of these organizations that put people in space is they, in the Marine Corps, we talk about getting it 75% right and then executing, make a decision and move. You don't want to get in that rocket and say, hey, we're 75% sure we've got this figured out, right? They dot every I and cross every T. And so I trust that they're going to do that. But that's why we need young, brilliant individuals to work in these environments to figure out how we can live and operate there. Okay, it's going to be much more challenging than we've seen in the movies. Absolutely. But we're not there yet. We're not there yet. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Doc, yep.
Given your experience and expertise on a personal level, how do you feel about Force Design 2030?
Okay, good question. So, if you've been who said okay? If you've been watching, I'll give you my honest opinion. But if you've been watching or reading a little bit of the behind-the-scenes Marine Corps conversation, some of it has gotten a bit dramatic, quite frankly. There have been a lot of what we call gray beards, so individuals that are retired. You've earned that title, sir, right? Hoorah. Well, I'm not far behind. I'm not far behind. But there's been a lot of people that have been challenging the idea of force design. Here's why I think it is the right move. Because we need a Marine Corps that can operate inside that weapons engagement zone, and you are not going to be able to get some of that heavy armor that would work very, very well in a European theater into that fight. And so we've got to evolve as a force, still earn the title Marine. I will not ever stand in front of any crowd that says, let's lower the standard so that we can get in there. Matter of fact, we cut Marines on purpose. We made our physical fitness test harder so that we can continue to make sure that we put the best Marines forward. And so focusing on Marines, warfighting ethos, but I think it's necessary to have, in many ways, going back to a World War II era mindset of expeditionary and amphibious operations, but lightening the load a little bit, because we're going to have to fight in a contested and congested environment. We're going to have to maneuver faster, and this is where, quite frankly, junior officers and junior NCOs were going to win the fight, not individuals with a lot of stripes like me. It's going to be corporals and captains, quite frankly, who are alone and unafraid in different islands, fighting in what we call EADO, Expeditionary Advanced Basing Operations, so all over the place, wreaking havoc on the Chinese, using unmanned platforms, you name it. All right? Do we have 100% right? Probably not. But what I love about the Marine Corps and the Commandant is he is open to honest debate. We go through the warfighting lab, run by my former company commander, now General Kyle Ellison. We run all of these vignettes and scenarios through and say, this is the force we need in order to meet the Indo-PACOM commander's requirements. All right? So I'm a believer in it. We've got to partner more with the Navy, and you've heard leadership talk about how we need enough ships to do that, and we've got to continue to press our elected leadership to make sure that they fund those types of things. You know, so I'm a believer in it. Many of them are. Many of them are. Not all of them. Not all of them. That's a true statement, right? So the Commandant and the Chief of Naval Operations, who I just saw on the TV today, are talking about that. Right? And I will tell you, I would like to, I won't say end on that unless there's another question, but I'd like to say something too. So what I love about this country is no matter where I go, and many of you have had this as well, people will come up to me out of the blue, and it may be the fancy haircut, I don't know, but they'll say, thank you for your service. And I love that. That is incredible. But what I would offer to all of the individuals who can is if you really want to thank a veteran or a service member, please vote. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. That's your call. But the way to truly thank an individual that has served is to do your homework and say, this person best represents my values, American values, and this is who I want to vote for. So that when we try to build a force, we have leadership that says, yeah, I understand the threat, and I gotta make sure that the Navy is fully funded to do that, or the Marine Corps, or whatever is in your heart is important. All right, so thanking a veteran to me is incredible, and I appreciate it always, especially when a free beer comes with it. But voting, I think, is how you truly thank them, and so that's how we get there. And there's comfortable debates there. We can debate offline if you like, Doc. I think it is the right approach. I think there's a lot of overstating what folks are saying. To include General Van Riper had mentioned, we're turning into a cyber force. That's not accurate. It's not accurate at all. But we have to understand that domain because we're going to have to fight and win in it. So, thank you. One more? Hey, sir.
Good afternoon. Master Gunnery Sergeant Scott Stalker. So I am a part of my school's debate team, and our resolution, which pretty much means the parameters in which we're allowed to make an argument, is that the United States should increase its security cooperation with NATO in the domain of cybersecurity. So as a person with immense cybersecurity experience. I believe you have a master's in cybersecurity from Harvard Kennedy. How important is network security to our critical infrastructure and to helping our just our critical infrastructure?
It's huge. And just to clarify a point, I do have a master's in cybersecurity. I went to Harvard, but not for that. Okay, so if someone's watching online, I don't want that to go out on Twitter or something saying I did. However, it is critically important, right? And so we now focus with NATO on the cyber domain. They're working through some of this because, as you can recall, NATO is multiple nations, and they all have their own sovereign ideas on what offensive cyber and defensive cyber is. But I can tell you, when I was at Cyber Command, I visited a lot of those nations: Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, other non-NATO nations like Moldova and Georgia, to make sure they understood how to harden their defense, so that when things like this happen in the Ukraine, it's critical. So General Mattis, when he was the Secretary of Defense, said something that I think you can use in your debates. And he said, if you want to, and it was, I'm going to paraphrase here, but ultimately what he was getting at was, if we want to have what you're getting after, which is global peace, which would be, most people in uniform would love that, then what you need to do is pay for less bullets and hire more diplomats. We need individuals in the embassies that are in State Department that are going forward and having dialogues with other nations. Disagreements is fine, but we've got to have that security cooperation with them. Otherwise, you need to fund us fully for what we're talking about over here with more ships and bullets and so on and so forth. And so most warfighters will agree with your premise on that. Cybersecurity to me is critical in all of those domains. Cyber education is critical. You know, I've got a 3-year-old daughter. It's not so much when she comes home anywhere she wants to see Daddy. She's asking where her iPad is, right? So she's on, and I got to make sure that she's doing the right things, not clicking on the link or whatever, or watching something, God forbid, that she shouldn't. It's hugely critical, all right? And so both the space domain and the cyber domain are something that NATO is working through and understands why it's so important. So you saw Starlink. If you've been watching what's going on and how the Ukraine is getting much of their internet,
yes,
it's via Starlink. SpaceX commercial sector providing that capability to them. It's huge. So hopefully that answers your question, but I agree that it's critically important.
Yes, and I have just one final question. Don't want to keep you too long.
I will stay all night. Yeah.
How familiar are you with Department of Defense policy on lethal autonomous weapons?
So I don't know what I couldn't rattle. I'm not a lawyer. I couldn't rattle off what lethal autonomous weapon policy is, but I don't believe we have. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Cheers.
Who's taking photos now? I'm going to put this down for a minute because I'm going to spill it. Don't take my beer, ma'am. I don't know what the policy is on it, but what I do know is that we, United States, you may correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe we have any policy that allows fully autonomous weapon systems without a human in the loop.
No, this is exactly what I was getting at.
Okay.
Department of Defense Policy 3000.09. This is a policy, and it essentially says that there is actually no requirements for a human in the loop for lethal autonomous weapons. And it is a claim that has been made in pretty much a lot of our debates, that even extending to high-ranking flag officers, that there are misconceptions about this policy, and that people, even in the military, don't actually know that you have to have a human. You don't have to have a human in the loop. And that is one thing that many of my debate partners in our team have made that claim, that it is a problem, that people don't know about that. So it's really interesting to see it actually happening in the flesh. Not to insult you or anything. I apologize.
I didn't know 3000.09. I wasn't tracking. No.
Yes, but yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Is your teacher here or someone? Because
this is them.
Ma'am, can we up his grade 1? He got me. He's on the debate team. He got me. So I'm not tracking that policy, and I will tell you, there's a lot of things going on in the department. I'm focused on a certain area specifically. I appreciate you bringing that to me because I think what you did is give me some homework, and I need to read about that. But I wasn't tracking that. Thank you.
Are you ready for round 2?
What do you got, ma'am? Don't give me policy 6000.18 now.
No, it's a little more simple question. What can you tell me about females in the U.S. Space Command?
I can tell you a lot, actually. So one of my greater partners is this lady named Nitro, Commander Gorski. She's a former H-60 pilot. She now works at Space Command with me, and a remarkable individual. And so we have, my goodness, I couldn't even tell you, but I would say probably in Space Command, 25-ish% females in there. Is that fair? I think I'm about right there. A lot of them, we have a lot of civilians in there as well. The armed forces, the media will tell you one thing, and that's their right to do that. But I will tell you it is a true meritocracy. And you have the opportunity to succeed or fail based on your own desires and your own will to put forth the effort. And I think ultimately that's what we want from a war-fighting organization, is not a lowering of standards or an increasing of standards. Give me the standard. Let me know what the cut line is. Air assault school, right? 12 miles, 3 hours. If you finish it in 3 hours and 1 second, you fail. We all knew that. And so the women there, the men there, what's the animal there? We got the dog in PA. We got a dog there. Anyways, we have what's a service animal, right? I go to our public affairs and say, hey, did the service animal earn the right to be here? But on a serious note, for you, ma'am, what I would tell you is truly endless opportunities. Are there some challenges from time to time? Absolutely. It's not a rose garden. And that's why leadership like myself have to advocate on behalf of our women and our men to make sure that there's no roadblocks for someone like you. And I tell folks all the time the story of Senior Chief Shannon Kent. I don't know have you heard of her name? Who has? I heard it. Yeah. So Shannon, my last job, I was at home one day, and the director of the National Security Agency, General Paul Nakasone, sent me a text and said, "Meet me at Andrews Air Force Base tomorrow. We're going to go we're going to go to Dover, and we're going to repatriate one of our individuals." Shannon Kent was my teammate, my sailor, and she was killed in Syria doing an operation with Special Forces. And we did a dignified transfer of her and the other men that were out there. And every time I'm in, and you get an opportunity on the 17th of November to do those things in Arlington, every time I'm there, I go to see her as well. And so for me, it is a true meritocracy. They're my teammates, whether they're women or men. And I will tell you, more and more people are getting there. We still have a little bit of ways to go, though. All right? Now, how old are you?
17.
All right. I joined when I was 17. But I will tell you, we are hiring. We are hiring, and for brilliant individuals such as yourself, when the time is right for you, we'd love to have someone with your skills.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
We get the teacher one more time.
Yeah.
I'm wondering.
I'm in no rush.
You're good? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, I'm a spouse of a veteran, Fort Campbell, 101st Airborne Ranger. I'm wondering if you think cyber and space warfare will change the impact on families of service members.
I haven't given that one a lot of thought, but here's what I would say. Our former Vice Chairman, General Hyten, often would say there's no space war, there's no cyber war, there is just war. I actually agree with that. Now, caveat that with consistently there are probes in the cyber domain, you see cyber theft and cyber hacking and that sort of thing, but I don't think it's true nation-state warfare where, let's shut down all of DC's power grid. Because I think if something like that were to happen, we would be all in true warfare. And so I think that just increases the opportunities for them to take advantage of us because we rely on cyber so much. And most of our adversaries realize in air, land, and sea, we've got the overmatch in terms of capability, maybe not capacity, but in capability we do. And so our areas we've got to get stronger on are both space and cyber. And that's where they're kind of peers of ours. And so we got to continue to fight and keep an eye on that. But I don't know specifically to your question how it changes that family dynamic, but I think it just, you're either in war or you're not. and hopefully we stay in the part where you're not.
All right, we have two last questions.
Okay.
Before I get to those last two questions, the beverage was transmitted from Florida to you.
Nice. Talk about Uber Eats. Thanks, Paul.
Okay, this question is
via a space-based capability. I got a beer here. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So this question is to Tech Sergeant. Could you tell us what jazzed you to join? Tell us a little bit about your experience.
Come on up here, G.
What's next?
Hey, so one of the things I told my teammate is I never try to put folks on the spot. There's some that are comfortable in front of audiences. GP is, but I think about 7 or 8 months ago you were in the Air Force. 3? Okay, time flies for me. All right, so 3 months is 7. And so he'll tell you his story briefly. Here you go, G.
Thank you all. Appreciate the question. I did not want to be put on the spot, but I knew at some point I probably was. I got a lot of welcomes from everybody saying I was probably the first Space Force here in the building, so I appreciate that. I actually missed my opportunity to join originally back when COVID had hit. Space Force was trying to get people to transfer in from other services. I was already a year away from my family, and I didn't want to worry about anything that might come along with that maybe I have to go do additional training because I was not part of space. My background is actually cybersecurity, so I worked with switches, routing, that kind of network stuff. So I told my family if the opportunity did arise again, I would love to be a part of that. That was part of the reason I actually joined the Air Force in the first place. Computers were super fascinating for me when I first joined, and the opportunity to actually be able to work with space now is going to be eye-opening for me for sure because things have changed in the past 16 years that I've been in the military. So I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to be looking at just yet. I've actually been working with Master Gunnery Sergeant Stalker for a little over a year now, so I haven't actually gotten into the whole Space Force side of it, but I'm looking forward to doing it. With my new promotion, I'm probably going to be supervising a lot of people now and trying to make sure that they're on the right track, make sure that they're developing the way that they should be for the Space Force.
Hey, real quick, too. So, GP, if you can kind of turn sideways here. So, not just as post 370 getting a new look at having a Guardian here, probably for the first time, but actually this is her new rank, too. All right, and so that's Technical Sergeant, that's E6. What will happen here shortly is he'll put another rocker on top of it and be a Master Sergeant. But that's the newest rank in the Department of Defense. Looks pretty snazzy to me. And so if we can get a round of applause for GP.
I think this may be the last question, and this can go to both of you.
Okay.
We got some very sharp individuals here. I'm going to bring this down to an elementary school level.
Okay.
Are we alone?
You know, the truth is, this is the truth. So I will give you the truth. You know, I was listening to a podcast last night, a very famous one, and he had a naval officer on there who showed some video, what we call FLIR, so forward-looking infrared radar, and there were unknown objects on there. The individual, oddly enough, who now runs the directorate for the Department of Defense that looks after this is our former Deputy Intelligence Officer, Mr. Sean Kirkpatrick, who I know personally, and he now runs the office of this unmanned aerial phenomenon. Okay? The truth is, I don't know. I believe there probably is, but I don't know. I don't have any evidence that there is. I'm being honest with you here. I have no idea. But it seems odd to me that this rock in the middle of nowhere, in an ever-expanding universe, would be the only living thing out there. And so I just don't know. All right? Thank you. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it. I'm going to stick around if you want to have a little sidebar or just talk about whatever. Thank you.